In this video, I want to mostly cover just how to set up your document and get started turning your photograph into a line drawing. So you're going to start out by choosing your photo and then creating a new document. So we'll create our new document here in Photoshop. The size needs to be 8 by 10. You can either go landscape or portrait. Make sure the resolution is 300 pixels per inch, color mode RGB. Hit create. And there's our new blank document. Into that, I'm going to place my photo. When I'm placing images into a Photoshop document, I almost always choose Place Embedded. They keep changing those options, and for right now, I think Place Embedded is probably the way to go. Place Linked is helpful in some situations, but I find that I run into issues with it more often than I would like to. Now that I have my photo placed into my document, I want to reduce the opacity. So in my layers panel, right up here, I can adjust the opacity, and notice that there's a slider built in. You can't see it, but if you mouse over it, you can see that you get some arrows popping up, or you can choose to click right there, and then there's that slider there. So I'm going to reduce the opacity to about 50%, give or take. I also want to lock this layer because I don't want to edit this layer. I want to create my own layers based on this image, my own line work and my own fill colors and everything like that, but I do not want to edit this original layer. So I'll go ahead and press that little lock. I had that layer selected and then I press that lock right there. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to just fill it with white. So I'll choose white, dump paint in there. It's above my photo layer. I'm going to pull it down below that layer. That will prevent any issues with your background layer. Maybe your background layer had been transparent or anything like that. I just like to put a blank layer below my photo layer. Honestly, right here, the way my layers are set up right now, I wouldn't really need it, but I do like to have that just in case. Next, I'm going to create another new blank layer. That's my layer 2. I'll pull that above my photo layer, and that's the layer that I'm going to start drawing on. And notice I said start drawing on. I would highly recommend that you break your line work up onto separate layers. So for example, I would do probably the major outlines of my bridge on one layer and then create a new layer and start working on some more of that detail work on a different layer. And again, new layer, and then work on the trees on that layer, maybe even individual trees on each layer. That way, everything's super flexible. If you need to go back and edit something, you can. If you need to change the order of the layers, if you need to delete something, it's so much easier to do that if things are broken up onto separate layers. So once you have your new layer created, you can start drawing in some of your lines. And I'm going to actually open up one that I had been working on. Okay, so here's an example of one that I've been working on. I have a bunch of the layers hidden, but there that is. So I have, and it's definitely a work in progress, but you can kind of see where we're going with this. So I have the major lines drawn back in just in black for right now. If you wanted to use other colors, you can, but I would highly recommend that the major color that you're using for your lines is black, because we're turning this photo into a graphic looking line drawing. And again, some things that I want you to keep in mind as you are drawing this. Make sure that as you move farther away, so things that are in the distance need to have finer lines. So notice here, and I didn't honestly do a great job with this. I did this super fast and I need to go back and rework some things. But notice the things that are in the distance have a finer line. The line weight is a lot less substantial than things that are in the foreground. So here, kind of the major bridge structure is a lot heavier in weight, and as it gets farther away, I go lighter. These here are too heavy in weight. I need to go back in and erase some of those and redraw them. And to make those changes, you can just change the size of your brush. Also, keep in mind that you can adjust your brush settings. So what I did for my lines was I came into my brush settings and I played with the smoothing. So that will help you create a smoother line if you increase that smoothing. If you decrease the smoothing, it'll allow you to get more precise detail. So keep things like that in mind and go ahead and play with these brush settings. This is the perfect opportunity to experiment with these things a little bit. But once you have drawn in all your lines, you've completed all your line work. And again, this is a work in progress, so I'm definitely not done with this, and I'll turn that off for now. Then what you can do is you can start going back in and blocking in some of the areas of color. And you can keep that photo layer on for reference. I had this unlocked. I should lock it again. But notice then that I am creating layers of color, kind of big areas of color, and I'm not going into a ton of detail with those areas of color. You can go into a fair amount of detail, but this is not something that you need to go in, like especially here on the bridge supports. I'm not going to paint in each of these bricks line by line. I will have my line work covering up all of my big areas of color. So most of the detail is coming in from my line work and not from my blocking in areas of color. And what I would recommend for your color is that you layer less opaque areas of color. So I had my brush opacity. I was playing around with brush opacity and some of these other options like wet edges for your brushes and things like that. Again, experiment with those. Even here in your layers panel, you can play around with the opacity of the layers. Like some of these layers I definitely do not love, but when you layer them up with some of the other layers, then they work a lot better. And bringing in these colors again, I would highly recommend, just like with your line work, that you separate things onto different layers. So notice here that just in that little sky area, and it's not even a big area of my photo, honestly, but I already have 3 layers for that sky, and I'm probably going to have a couple of more because again, I want to maintain the flexibility of those layers. I want to be able to turn some off, turn the opacity down on some, and or come back in and erase some areas if I need to. So as long as I'm working on separate layers for everything, then I have that flexibility. Also, I just want to remind you again, keep in mind that you do not want to draw or paint or anything on this original photograph layer. Lock that thing. Unless you're moving it or doing something else to it, then keep that locked. I wouldn't probably recommend that you move it because that will mess up everything, but you might have to unlock that for some reason. But anyway, those are the basics of getting your line drawing going. I can't wait to see what you all put together for this. Good luck.